Hello Year 10. This is a short video to help you with analysing sources, which is an activity that you will start this Friday in class and be continuing during this unit. So just a reminder what you need to do when you're doing source analysis. You'll be receiving a handout with these questions across the top. Just a reminder, explicit meanings are the simple and obvious messages. Implicit meanings are those that are more complex and require you to infer ideas from the information presented. So in the first column, what is the source about? That is your explicit meaning. Well, tied to the explicit meaning. You also have the implicit meaning. And to do that, you're going to need to look for things such as what particular vocabulary is used. Does that vocabulary have connotations? That means they have extra meanings on top of their dictionary meaning. If you're looking at images, use your COPs: color, orientation, proximity, positioning, size, scale, and symbolism to look for that inferential meaning. In all sources, you're looking for whose point of view. Now, the simple version might be the name of the person who said this, but expanding on that, a more sophisticated interpretation is, for example, what you're going to be looking at, the senator. This is a person who is a white member of Australian society in a position of elected power. So that gives them a different point of view to someone who might just be an ordinary worker or an Indigenous person. You're looking for what that point of view is. Sometimes it's going to be easy to see. Others, you're going to have to look at more carefully. Remember, point of view can also be an attitude towards someone. We'll explore that with the photo we're looking at. You're also looking for any bias. Now that bias is very much linked to whose point of view is being presented. Who aren't we hearing from is an idea to keep in your head. How is it shown? Consider again the language, the use of symbols, the way that people respond to each other. So as an example, there is this first source. I'm just going to wait for a moment for you to read that to yourselves. Okay, if you haven't quite gone over it, feel free to pause the video and go over it again. When we're looking at this source, this is an example of how you could do, how you can do the analysis. What is the source about? It's about granting voting rights to Indigenous Australians. That's our very easy overview. The explicit meaning? This person believes that they should not be granted voting rights because Indigenous people are not of the same quality or status as non-Indigenous Australians. The implicit meaning? They believe that Indigenous Australians are inferior. There is a racist element to this. There's also the implicit meaning that the dying out of the Indigenous population of Australia is a good thing because they weren't worth anything anyway, and this should be a white country. How do we know? Have a look back at some of the words that were used here to describe people. Horrible, degraded, dirty creature. The same rights as our wives and daughters. It should be a white man's country. We intend to keep it that way. The only consolation we have is that they are dying out. Consolation means this is not a bad thing. So whose point of view is being represented? A senator in a position of power, an older white gentleman. This is someone who has been elected to put forward a particular point of view, which is that Australia has become a white man's country and it should be a white man's country. Notice it's not a lot of mention of women or of Indigenous Australians. Is there any bias? Most certainly. The bias is racially based, that the white race, and particularly white men, are superior to all other groups. Go back and look at the language and you'll see how it's shown. It's similar to the implicit meaning language. Now, when you're looking at a visual source such as this photograph, you need to look at both the photo and at the little bit of information underneath it in the caption. So, on here we have a group of tiny half-caste and quadroon. Half-caste means that they had one Indigenous parent and one non-Indigenous parent. Quadroon means that they had one Indigenous grandparent and one non-Indigenous grandparent as a general rule. These children are at the half-caste home in Darwin. They have been taken away from their parents and put in this home for children. The minister, a member of the government, has appealed to charities, so people who mean to do good, in Melbourne and Sydney, at the other end of the country, to find homes for these children and rescue them from becoming outcasts. What to look at? Look at the children's faces. What are their expressions? What are they holding on to? What are they wearing? Put that together. What does that tell you about how the children are feeling? Maybe about how they're being treated. So what is the source about? It's about placing children, half-caste children, in foster homes or charity homes. The explicit meaning is that these children are at risk of being outcast by society and they need taking care of. The implicit meaning is that these children are not wanted and are not as good as others because they are half-caste. We also have in there that these children are considered the property of the government and not part of a family because the government, the minister, is taking them away. That comes from the caption underneath. If you're going to go on further and think about the expressions on the children's faces, that's another section on what the source is about. What is the condition of these children and how do we know? Whose point of view is presented? The government's. Who don't we hear from? The children and their families. What is their point of view? We need to rescue these poor children. Why? That would be something you'd go on to explain in your inferred meaning. Is there any bias? Not obvious. This is where you need to infer meaning. To rescue them from becoming outcasts. What does that tell you about how the fact that these children have one Indigenous and one non-Indigenous parent are viewed by the rest of the community, in particular the white community? How is it shown? Think of just putting that X on one little girl. That X on the little girl at the front was written by a lady who said, "I'll take that one if she's a good worker." She's about 6 years old. Okay, when you come to do your own source analysis in the lesson on Friday, think through these steps, not just explicit meaning, but look more deeply at how the attitudes and values and beliefs of the time influenced what people were doing and saying.